Las Vegas, May 1967. The Strip burned bright against the desert night, a river of neon and promise stretching through the darkness. Every casino competed to outshine its neighbors with bigger marquees, brighter lights, more spectacular shows. The Sands had Frank. The International was building dreams around Elvis. And the Riviera had Dean Martin, the smoothest operator who ever held a microphone, the man whose voice could make slot machines sound like symphonies and whose presence turned gambling losses into acceptable expenses. Dean's name on a marquee meant money. Not just good money. Not just reliable money. Astronomical guaranteed. Print-it-yourself money. High rollers flew in from Los Angeles, New York, Chicago just to watch him perform, just to be in the same room with that effortless charm, that warm baritone voice that made every song sound like a personal conversation. His show started at 10 p.m., but by 9:30 the casino floor would be packed with people trying their luck before showtime, hoping some of that Dean Martin magic would rub off on their dice, their cards, their spinning roulette wheels. But Las Vegas in 1967 wasn't built on talent alone. Behind every velvet curtain, beneath every champagne toast, underneath the laughter and the slot machine symphonies and the showgirl sequence, there was infrastructure, there was organization, there was a power structure as carefully constructed as the hotels themselves, and just as essential to keeping the lights on, the legitimate syndicate, the families who financed the city's construction back in the 40s and 50s, controlled Las Vegas with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. They owned the land, they owned the buildings, they owned the contracts, the liquor licenses, the relationships with law enforcement. They decided who performed where, who got permits, who walked away from card games with their kneecaps still functioning properly. It wasn't democratic. It wasn't fair. It wasn't even particularly subtle, if you knew what to look for. But it was stable, and in their world, stability meant profit for everyone who understood and respected the rules. Dean Martin understood this ecosystem perfectly. He'd grown up in Steubenville, Ohio, where men in expensive suits controlled steel mills and gambling parlors with the same quiet, absolute authority. He knew that success in show business wasn't just about hitting the right notes or delivering the perfect punchline. It was about understanding who really held power and respecting that structure, working within it, never trying to go around it or above it. His arrangement with the Riviera was elegant in its simplicity. He performed, they promoted him, everyone made money. The syndicate took their percentage from the casino's nightly profits. Dean took his enormous salary plus perks that included suites, cars, anything you wanted. The system hummed along beautifully, efficiently, profitably. Dean got creative freedom, personal security, and compensation that made him one of the wealthiest entertainers in America. In return, he showed up on time every night, delivered perfection to packed houses, and kept his mouth shut about the cash that moved through back offices after the official count was done. It worked because everyone knew their place. Everyone respected the chain of command. Everyone understood that the structure existed for good reason, that trying to circumvent it or challenge, it was the fastest way to find yourself in the desert learning that Vegas had more sand than just what was visible from the Strip. But in any power system, there are always men who look at order and see only opportunity. Men who mistake the smooth operation of machinery for weakness in its operators. Men who convince themselves that boldness will be rewarded instead of punished, that ambition matters more than understanding, that wanting something badly enough is the same as deserving it. The rogue crew that emerged in early 1967 were exactly those kind of men. They called themselves businessmen, entrepreneurs, the new generation. They were younger than the syndicate old guard, hungrier, less connected to the founding families, but convinced that didn't matter anymore. This was modern Vegas. They told themselves the old rules were outdated. The old bosses were dinosaurs who didn't understand that times had changed, that the city was growing, that there was room for new players with new ideas about how things should work. They controlled some street operations, had their fingers in a few smaller casinos, ran some books, moved some merchandise. Nothing major, nothing that threatened the established order. But they looked at the Riviera's profits, at Dean Martin sold-out shows bringing in millions every month, and they saw a fortune they weren't sharing. They saw money flowing past them into other pockets, and it ate at them. It kept them awake at night. It made them angry and ambitious and dangerously stupid. Their logic was simple, seductive, and completely wrong. If Dean Martin was making the Riviera $10 million a year, why were they getting nothing? They had connections. They had muscle. They had ambition. Why shouldn't they manage Dean's schedule, book his appearances, take a percentage of his earnings? Why should they have to ask permission from the old guard, go through proper channels, wait for approval that might never come? In March, they made their first approach. A representative, a smooth-talking guy named Lou Castellano, showed up at Dean's dressing room after performance. He was polite, complimentary about the show, and then he got a business. His people, he explained, represented interests that would like to discuss a new arrangement for Dean's appearances. Better terms, more flexibility, opportunities to expand into venues the Riviera didn't control. Dean was sitting at his mirror, removing stage makeup. He didn't turn around. His voice was casual, almost bored. I have an arrangement. It's working fine. Lou tried a different angle. The people he represented, they had connections. They could open doors. New cities, new venues, new opportunities that could make Dean even bigger than he already was. I appreciate the offer, Dean said, still not turning around. But I'm not interested in making changes. I'm happy where I am. Lou pushed a little harder. This was a limited time opportunity. His people were extending a courtesy by approaching Dean directly. But that courtesy wouldn't last forever. Eventually, they'd need an answer, and they hoped it would be the right answer. Now, Dean turned to look at him. His face was calm, his voice quiet, but there was steel underneath. The people you represent don't own the doors you're talking about. Someone else does. And I'm not interested in doing business with people who don't respect that. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even emphatic. Dean delivered the same way he'd deliver a punchline on stage, smooth and effortless and final. Lou left, but he came back. Over the next several weeks, different members of the crew made approaches. Some were friendly, talking about mutual benefit and win-win opportunities. Some were subtly threatening, mentioning how accidents could happen, how performers could find themselves without venues, how loyalty should flow toward people who could actually help your career instead of people living in the past. Every approach got the same response. Polite, respectful, unmovable. No, Dean understood what they didn't. He wasn't just under contract to a hotel. He was under protection. The men who actually ran Las Vegas had invested in him, promoted him, built entire marketing campaigns around his name. They'd made him wealthy beyond anything he'd imagined growing up in Ohio. In return, they expected loyalty. Not servitude, not slavery, but loyalty. There was a difference, an important difference, and Dean respected that difference because he understood what it meant to give your word to people who honored theirs. The rogue crew didn't understand any of this. They saw his refusal as personal rejection, as arrogance, as defiance. They'd made what they considered generous offers, and Dean had turned them down repeatedly, without even pretending to consider them. In their minds, they'd been patient. They'd been reasonable. They'd followed proper business etiquette. And now their patience was exhausted. By May, the approaches stopped. Dean noticed, but didn't think much of it. He figured they'd finally gotten the message and moved on to easier targets. He was wrong. They hadn't moved on. They'd just changed tactics. What Dean didn't know was that the rogue crew had convinced themselves of something catastrophically dangerous. They decided that the legitimate syndicate's power was exaggerated, that the old guard was weak, that in this new Las Vegas, boldness would be rewarded. They believed that if they could control Dean Martin, if they could force him to work under their terms, they could prove themselves as serious players. They could demand respect from the established families, demand a seat at the table, demand recognition as equals. It was a fatal miscalculation, but they were committed to it now, and commitment without understanding is just another word for suicide. On May 23rd, Dean received a message after his evening show. There was an urgent meeting scheduled. Top floor rooftop of the Riviera. Important business that couldn't wait until morning. The message came through channels that seemed legitimate, with names attached that Dean recognized. He didn't question it. Why would he? Rooftop meetings weren't unusual for sensitive business discussions. The view was spectacular. The privacy was total. And the desert air helped clear heads after hours under stage lights. The performance that night had been flawless. As always, Dean sang, Everybody loved somebody to a packed house, his voice warm and intimate even as it filled every corner of the showroom. He made it look effortless because he was that good, because he'd been doing this his whole life, because talent at that level becomes as natural as breathing. The audience gave him a standing ovation. He bowed, waved, threw kisses, walked off stage to thunderous applause. In his dressing room, he changed out of his tuxedo into a casual suit. The message had said the meeting was informal. Dean assumed it was about scheduling, maybe a special private event for high rollers, the kind of lucrative appearances that happen regularly. He took the service elevator to the top floor, then climbed the access stairs to the rooftop. The door opened onto cool desert night. The strip spread out below like a glittering promise, neon rivers flowing through darkness. Music and laughter drifted up from somewhere far below. The air smelled like expensive perfume and cigarette smoke and money. And waiting in the shadows were 15 men. Dean recognized a few faces immediately. Lou Castellano, two others who'd made approaches in his dressing room over the past weeks. The rest were strangers, all dressed in dark suits, all standing in a loose semicircle that made it very clear this wasn't a business meeting. "Gentlemen," Dean said, his voice steady and calm, "this feels less like a meeting and more like an ambush. We tried to do this the easy way," Lou said, stepping forward. "We tried to be reasonable. We made you offers, good offers, fair offers, and you turned us down every single time. Because I'm not interested in what you're selling." Dean replied simply, "I have commitments, obligations. I honor those." "Your obligations are to whoever pays you the most," another man said, heavy set with cold eyes. "And we're willing to pay more than anyone." "It's not about money," Dean said quietly. "It's about respect, about doing business the right way. And what you're suggesting isn't the right way." The 15 men moved closer, tightening the semicircle. Dean could see it now in their faces, in their body language, in the way they positioned themselves. This wasn't going to end with negotiation. They'd brought him up here for a different purpose entirely. "Last chance, Martin," Lou said, his voice harder now. "You sign with us tonight, or you don't sign anything ever again." Dean looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, that famous Dean Martin smile that had charmed millions, that had sold out showrooms and top charts, and made him one of the most beloved entertainers in America. "Then I guess I won't be signing." They rushed him. Dean wasn't a fighter. He was a singer, an entertainer, a performer. But he'd grown up tough in Ohio's steel country, and he tried to defend himself. He managed to land one solid punch before they overwhelmed him. Hands grabbed his arms, his shoulders, his jacket. They dragged him toward the edge of the roof. There was no ceremony, no dramatic villain speech, no lengthy explanation of why this was happening. This wasn't the movies. This was business. They shoved him over the edge. 14 stories above the Las Vegas Strip, Dean Martin fell into darkness. The lights of the city spun around him. Wind rushed past his ears. His mind went blank with the impossible reality of what was happening, with the understanding that this was how it ended, falling through empty air above a city he'd helped build with his voice and his charm and his talent. But fate or physics or divine intervention or pure blind luck had other plans. 50 feet below the rooftop, the hotel maintenance crew had installed a heavy-duty service awning above the loading dock. It was designed to withstand desert windstorms. Reinforced canvas stretched over steel frame built to last decades. Dean struck it at terminal velocity, and the awning didn't stop his fall, but it slowed it. The canvas ripped. The frame buckled and bent, but it absorbed enough impact to change its trajectory, to steal enough momentum to transform certain death into merely catastrophic injury. He rolled off the collapsing awning and crashed onto a lower terrace that jutted out from the 10th floor, a decorative balcony that nobody ever used because it connected to maintenance rooms instead of guest suites. The pain was instant and overwhelming. His left shoulder dislocated on impact, the joint separating with a sensation that whited out his vision. 3 ribs cracked, sharp breaks that made breathing feel like swallowing broken glass. His right leg fractured below the knee. Blood poured from a deep gash above his eye, streaming down his face, making everything look red and distant. But his heart was beating. His lungs were pulling air. Against all probability, against all logic, he was alive, 40 feet below on the loading dock, a hotel security guard named Michael Torres was ending his shift. He just clocked out and was heading his car when he heard the crash above him. A sound like thunder but wrong, localized, violent. He looked up and saw the destroyed awning still swinging in the breeze, canvas shredded, frame twisted. Training and instinct kicked in immediately. He grabbed his radio. Code red. 10th floor terrace, west side. Medical emergency. Repeat medical emergency. Torres didn't know it was Dean Martin on that terrace. He just knew someone had fallen. Someone was hurt, and every second mattered. He ran for the service stairs. On the rooftop, the 15 men stood frozen, staring over the edge into darkness. Lou leaned out, trying to see the ground 14 stories below. The loading dock lights were dim, and shadows obscured everything. "Is he?" One of them started, his voice shaking slightly. "Has to be," Lou said flatly. "Nobody survives that fall. Nobody. We should check," the heavy-set one said. "Make sure it's done." "Yeah," Lou agreed. "Let's go confirm." They headed for the stairs, moving quickly but not running, not panicking. In their minds, this was done. Problem solved. They'd sent a message that would echo through Vegas. Don't refuse us. Don't disrespect us. Don't think your connections will protect you. What they didn't know was that Torres had reached the terrace 90 seconds after fall. He knelt beside Dean, checked for a pulse, found one, weak but steady. Dean's eyes flickered open, unfocused, glazed with pain and shock. "Don't move," Torres said urgently. "Help is coming. Just stay still." Dean tried to speak, managed one word through split lips. "Pushed." Torres understood instantly. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a suicide attempt. Someone had tried to murder Dean Martin. And if they'd tried once, they'd try again to finish the job. Torres made a decision that saved Dean's life. Instead of waiting for medical team to arrive through normal channels, instead of following protocol, he used his radio to call directly to Jack Romano, the Riviera's head of security. Romano was old school, personally loyal to the legitimate syndicate that owned the hotel, a man who understood that some situations required handling outside official procedures. Torres gave him the situation in 3 sentences. Dean Martin was on the 10th floor terrace with severe injuries. He'd been pushed from the rooftop. The people who pushed him were probably coming to confirm the kill. Romano's response was immediate and decisive. "Keep him there. I'm coming personally. Tell nobody else." Nobody. 3 minutes later, Romano arrived with 2 other security men and a doctor who worked exclusively for the syndicate, a physician who specialized in treating injuries that couldn't be reported to hospitals, injuries that needed to disappear from official records. They moved Dean carefully but quickly, using a maintenance stretcher, carrying him down service stairs that the public never saw, through corridors that didn't appear on any hotel map, to a suite on the 3rd floor that wasn't listed in any reservation system. By the time the 15 men reached the ground level and made their way to the loading dock, Dean Martin was gone. The destroyed awning hung like evidence of their crime, but there was no body beneath it, no blood trail leading away from it, no sign that anyone had survived the fall or been moved afterward. Lou stood in the loading dock, confusion turning slowly to unease. Search the area. Check everywhere. He has to be here somewhere. They searched for 20 minutes, checking shadows, looking under vehicles, examining every corner and crevice. Nothing. No body. No blood. No evidence that Dean Martin had landed here at all, except for that destroyed awning swinging gently in the desert breeze. Maybe. One of them started, then stopped. There was no maybe. They'd push him off a 14-story building. There was no version of reality where he walked away from that, but they couldn't find the body. And in their world, if you couldn't confirm the kill didn't count. They left the Riviera 30 minutes after the push, confused but trying to project confidence. Lou told his crew they'd accomplished what they came for. Whether they found the body or not didn't matter. Nobody survived a fall like that. Dean Martin was dead, and now they could take control of his contracts, his venues, his entire operation. They could force the Riviera to negotiate with them. They could demand recognition from the legitimate syndicate. They genuinely believed it would work. They believed they'd struck a blow that would reshape Vegas' power dynamics. that would prove they were serious players who couldn't be ignored or dismissed. It would take less than 6 hours for them to realize how catastrophically, fatally wrong they were. In the third-floor hidden suite, the syndicate doctor worked on Dean's injuries with professional efficiency. The dislocated shoulder was reset with a sickening pop that made Dean nearly pass out despite his attempt to stay conscious. The fractured ribs were carefully taped, each breath still agony, but at least manageable. The leg fracture was stabilized with a temporary splint. The gash above his eye was cleaned and stitched closed. Throughout all of it, Dean stayed conscious, jaw clenched, refusing pain medication that might cloud his mind, might make him vulnerable if the 15 men somehow found him. Who did this? Romano asked when the doctor stepped away to prepare more supplies. Dean told him everything. All 15 names he could remember, descriptions of the faces he didn't know, every detail about the rooftop meeting, the fake message that had lured him there, the brief conversation before they rushed him. Romano's expression darkened with each detail. When Dean finished, Romano was quiet for a long moment. Then he said simply, "They're dead, man. They just don't know it yet." He made a phone call. Just one. The man who answered was named Anthony Benedetto, though everyone in Vegas called him the broker, because he brokered peace between families, territories, business interests. He was the underboss of the legitimate syndicate that controlled Las Vegas, the man who made decisions about matters that couldn't be voted on or negotiated, who understood that sometimes peace required demonstrating the cost of disrupting it. Romano explained what had happened in clinical detail. 15 men from a road crew had attempted to murder Dean Martin by throwing him off the Riviera rooftop. Dean had survived only because of a service awning that broke his fall. The 15 men were currently searching for his body, unaware he was alive and hidden. There was silence on the line for 10 long seconds. Then Benedetto's voice, calm and measured, "Keep him safe. Don't let anyone know he survived except people you trust absolutely. We're handling this." The response was already in motion before Romano hung up the phone. What happened over the next 48 hours was not loud. It was not public. It was not chaotic. It was calculated, methodical, and absolutely thorough. The legitimate syndicate that controlled Las Vegas hadn't built their empire by being merciful or forgiving. They'd built it by understanding that certain actions required certain responses, that some violations of order couldn't be tolerated, that maintaining power meant demonstrating what happened when someone challenged that power. Attacking Dean Martin without authorization wasn't just violence. It wasn't just attempted murder. It was bad business. It threatened profits. It threatened the stability that made those profits possible. And in their world, threatening stability was the only truly unforgivable sin. The first move came at 3 a.m., less than 6 hours after Dean hit that terrace. A warehouse on the outskirts of Vegas, a property tied to the road crew street operations, erupted in flames. The fire department responded, but by the time they arrived, the building was already fully engulfed. The structure collapsed. Everything inside was destroyed. The fire marshal's report would later list the cause as electrical malfunction, and nobody questioned it because nobody cared enough to look deeper. At 9 a.m., 2 of the road crew's captains received messages summoning them to a meeting with Benedetto's people. This was presented as an opportunity, a chance to explain their side, to negotiate terms, to avoid further consequences. They went willingly, even eagerly, thinking this was their moment to prove they deserved respect. They drove to a location north of the city. Neither man was ever seen again. No bodies were found. No missing person reports were filed. They simply vanished as completely as if they'd never existed. By noon, every casino on the Strip had been informed that the remaining members of the road crew were no longer welcome on any property controlled by the legitimate syndicate. Their credit was revoked. Their markers were called in. Their access to private games was permanently terminated. The message was clear. These men no longer existed in Vegas terms. They were ghosts, shadows, less than nothing. The systematic elimination continued throughout the day. 4 more men disappeared between noon and 6 p.m., picked up at various locations around the city, driven away in black sedans, never arriving at their destinations. By evening, the remaining members of the crew understood what was happening. Some tried to run, heading for California or Arizona. They were intercepted before they reached city limits. Others tried to hide, going to ground in apartments or hotels where they thought they'd be safe. They were found. A few tried to fight, pulling guns or making threats. They were overwhelmed. By midnight on May 24th, 36 hours after Dean's fall, 12 of the 15 men were gone. The last 3 tried one desperate gambit, going directly to one of Benedetto's known locations and offering information, offering cooperation, offering anything if they could just be spared. They were invited inside for a conversation. None of them came back out. By the end of the week, all 15 men who'd stood on that rooftop were gone. No funerals appeared on public record. No police statements were issued. No revenge attempts materialized. They were simply erased, removed from Las Vegas as thoroughly as if they'd never been part of it. The message rippled through every level of Vegas society. Casino workers whispered about it. Dealers told each other the story in break rooms. Performers heard pieces of it and understood without being told the full details. Everyone knew what had happened, even if the specifics remained vague. 15 men had tried to kill Dean Martin. The legitimate syndicate had responded with overwhelming force. And now those 15 men no longer existed. Nobody spoke about it openly. Nobody had to. In Las Vegas, some lessons are taught silently. Dean spent 3 weeks recovering in that hidden third-floor suite. His ribs healed slowly, each breath a reminder of the fall. The leg required a cast and crutches. The shoulder took longest, the torn ligaments needing time to repair. Physical therapy to restore range of motion. But he was alive, and every morning he woke up breathing felt like a gift he hadn't earned but wouldn't refuse. Romano visited daily, bringing food, news, reassurance. He told Dean what had happened to the 15 men, though he kept the details vague. Dean didn't ask for specifics. He understood the broad strokes, and that was enough. "They're gone," Romano said simply. "All of them. They can't hurt you. They can't hurt anyone." Dean nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Romano said. "Thank the people who own this city for understanding that some things can't be tolerated." On June 18th, for weeks after fall, Dean Martin returned to the stage at the Riviera. The showroom was sold out within hours of the announcement. Every seat filled, people standing in the back. Word had spread through Vegas that Dean was performing again, and everyone wanted to witness his return, wanted to be part of the moment when he stepped back into the spotlight. Dean walked on stage slowly. His movements were careful, measured. His left arm carried visible memory of the fall. Range of motion still limited, shoulders still healing. But when he reached the microphone and the spotlight hit his face, something magic happened. The room erupted. 2,000 people rose to their feet in spontaneous ovation, applause thundering through the showroom, lasting 5 full minutes before Dean raised his hand to quiet them. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice still smooth, still warm, still unmistakably Dean Martin. "It's good to be back." He didn't mention the rooftop. He didn't mention the fall. He didn't mention the 15 men or the 48 hours that followed. He didn't need to. In Las Vegas, everyone already knew. The story had become legend even while it was still happening. Whispered in corridors and back rooms, told and retold until the details varied, but the core truth remained constant. 15 men had pushed Dean Martin from a rooftop. None walked away. Dean sang. Everybody loved somebody that night, his voice filling the showroom just like it had on the night of the fall. But something had changed. There was depth now that hadn't been there before, an understanding of mortality, of luck, of the thin line between life and death. The audience heard it, felt it, responded to it with reverence and joy. After the show, Benedetto came to Dean's dressing room. They'd never met face-to-face before, their business always conducted through intermediaries. He was older than Dean expected, distinguished-looking, wearing an expensive suit that looked like it belonged in a boardroom instead of backstage. "Mr. Martin," Benedetto said formally, "I wanted to see for myself that you're well." "Thanks to you," Dean said. "Thanks to your people." Benedetto shook his head slightly. "What happened to you was bad for business, bad for order, bad for Las Vegas. We simply corrected a mistake. They paid a high price for that mistake. They tried to kill you without authorization," Benedetto said simply. "Without understanding, without respect. In our world, That's unforgivable. Not because you're special, though you are, but because letting it stand would have invited chaos, would have told everyone that the rules don't matter. That power comes from boldness instead of understanding. We couldn't allow that. Dean nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Benedetto moved toward the door, then paused. Continue doing what you do, Mr. Martin. Make this city shine. That's your job. Protection is ours. The incident changed Las Vegas in ways both subtle and profound. The road crew's elimination sent a message that resonated through every level of the city's power structure. Other ambitious crews, other men who've been considering making moves outside proper channels, reconsidered. The legitimate syndicate's response had been swift, total, and undeniable. Challenge the order, and you wouldn't get a warning. You wouldn't get a second chance. You'd simply cease to exist. Dean Martin continued performing at the Riviera for years afterward. His shows remained sold out, his charm undiminished, his talent as sharp as ever. But everyone who saw him after that night understood they were watching someone who'd survived the unsurvivable. Someone who'd fallen 14 stories and lived to sing about it. The story of the Rooftop became part of Vegas legend, told in variations depending on who was telling it. Some versions said Dean was pushed by jealous rivals. Others claimed it was a mob hit gone wrong. A few insisted it was an accident that got spun into legend. But the core truth remained consistent across all versions. Dean Martin fell from the Riviera rooftop in May 1967, and the men responsible for pushing him all disappeared within 48 hours. What the incident revealed was the true nature of power in Las Vegas. It wasn't about who was loudest or boldest or most ambitious. It was about understanding the structure, respecting the hierarchy, knowing that stability mattered more than individual achievement. The legitimate syndicate that controlled the city had built something that generated billions of dollars, employed tens of thousands of people, turned desert sand into American fantasy. They protected that structure ruthlessly because any crack in the foundation threatened everything above it. Dean Martin represented something valuable to that structure. His talent brought in profits. His presence elevated the Riviera above competitors. His name and lights made the entire strip more attractive to high rollers worldwide. Attacking him wasn't just attacking one man. It was attacking the system itself. And the system responded accordingly. Years later, long after Dean had retired from performing, long after the era of mob-controlled Vegas had transitioned to corporate ownership, people still told the story. It became a cautionary tale about respect, about understanding power, about the cost of arrogance. 15 men thought they could bypass the established order, thought they could force their will through violence, thought their ambition mattered more than the structure that made Vegas possible. They were wrong. Catastrophically, fatally wrong. None of them lived long enough to learn from that mistake. But their elimination taught everyone else in Las Vegas a lesson they'd failed to understand. Power doesn't come from wanting it. Power comes from understanding it, respecting it, working within it rather than against it. Dean Martin understood that. He always had. Even when 15 men surrounded him on a rooftop. Even when they pushed him into darkness. Even when he fell 14 stories towards certain death. Some part of him understood that survival wasn't just about luck or physics or service awnings. It was about being valuable enough to the real power structure, that they'd move heaven and earth to protect you, that they'd eliminate threats with absolute efficiency, that they'd send a message so clear and undeniable that nobody would ever make that mistake again. 15 men pushed Dean Martin from a rooftop. None walked away. That's the story. That's the legend. That's the lesson Las Vegas taught in May 1967, written in blood and silence, and the systematic elimination of men who thought they understood power but only understood ambition. Dean Martin returned to the stage, returned to the spotlight, returned to making Las Vegas shine with his voice and his charm and his talent. The city protected him because he was valuable, because he understood his role, because he respected the structure that made everything possible. And somewhere in the desert, where the neon lights fade into darkness and sand covers everything eventually, 15 men learned the hardest lesson of all. In Las Vegas, you don't challenge the house. Not ever. Not if you want to walk away.